Good afternoon. The webinar will begin promptly at 3 p.m. The webinar will begin in 5 minutes. The webinar will begin in 30 seconds. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening as we have attendees from around the world joining us on our webinar today. This is meant to be an informative session for those of you who use or are exploring the use of the Workday Financial and Human Capital Management tool. As proper etiquette, please ensure your microphones are on mute. Any questions you may have can be entered via the chat functionality on your GoToWebinar panel. Questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation. Any questions we do not get to will be answered via email. At the conclusion of this webinar, you will also receive an email containing a short survey. Your feedback is important to us, and we also love to receive topics that may be of interest for upcoming webinars. This webinar is sponsored by the Testing Consultancy, TTC. If you have not heard of the Testing Consultancy, we are a global niche consulting firm that focuses on all things testing. We believe it takes not only the right tools, but the right people, processes, and technology together to drive digital transformation. We help to revolutionize the journey of delivering quality software to give our clients a competitive advantage. At this day and age, most organizations are shifting from a waterfall model of software delivery, which is heavy on manual testing, to an agile or DevOps model for software delivery. They are doing this because waterfall is slow, costly, and high risk. Organizations which do not adopt a modern software development approach risk being left behind commercially as their competitors embrace technology as a competitive advantage. When organizations start the transformation to Agile and DevOps, they find that their manual approach to testing is a bottleneck. At TTC, we assist our clients to make these changes by providing modern software testing and quality engineering techniques such as test automation and test design optimization, which removes the bottleneck and enables organizations to make the transformation to Agile and DevOps. We hope you are as passionate about all things testing as we are, but know the real reason you are here today is to learn more about Workday specific testing. Over the next 30 to 40 minutes, we will explore how to overcome the following challenges of mitigating customization features, enhancing compatibility, maintaining frequent updates and required patches, defining user roles and securities, optimizing overall business process workflows, and more. We hope at the conclusion of this webinar, you will be able to understand why testing Workday effectively is important, best practices for conquering testing challenges in Workday, and some of the best tools for testing Workday. Before we get started, we have a few introductions. My name is Carla Hartman. I am the Customer Success Manager overseeing some of the client-facing operations regarding marketing and talent acquisition in the U.S. market. My background is primarily in marketing and leadership, and I've spent several years in the energy and software industries. However, outside of work and being a lover of test automation, I enjoy yoga, outdoor activities such as hiking, dance, and fitness. I'm based out of Houston, Texas. If you're ever in the area, please contact me, and I can be reached via email by carla.hartman@testingconsultancy.com. Now for the star of the show, Priya Balachandran. Priya is based out of one of our New Zealand offices and has over 15 years of QA and test management experience. Along with myself, she is truly passionate about testing, and I've really enjoyed working with her on this webinar and her sharing her insights. Outside of work, you can find her outdoors or with her lovely family. Once again, thank you all for being here. And without further ado, I will hand it off to Priya.
So thank you, Carla, for that wonderful introduction. Welcome, everyone. As you know, I am from the little country of New Zealand. We are way down at the south, and it's quite funny. There's a joke that we sometimes get missed off of the world map, but we are there. We are there. There with us. So without further delaying this webinar, I'm going to talk about how we can test Workday effectively and how we can make that testing work for you and your organization. So moving on. Just so we can recap, I'm just going to schedule this webinar and divide it into four main areas. So we'll touch about what we know and don't know about Workday, why testing effectively is important, what are the challenges we see in Workday, and then my personal favorite and how we're going to go about testing it. And that's my personal test mantra that we'll go through. So let's start with what we know about Workday, right? So we know it's a cloud-based HCM tool. It's a one-stop shop, that ranges from HR to finance to big data analytics. It's out there. It's gaining global presence. It's gaining traction. Approximately, we have about 1,474 companies globally which have adopted it. It's been recently recognized as in the Gartner Magic Quadrant as an identified leader in cloud in HCM management suites. And in New Zealand, so in Asia Pacific and the US, Workday has already been there. It's way out there. New Zealand, because I'm from New Zealand, I have to talk about it. So we are getting there, and we are catching up. We are playing catching up, but there's a few organizations that have already adopted. And I know in today's audience or target group we have, some of you are thinking of embarking on your Workday journey. Some of you are mid-through of your Workday journey. Some of you have already done and dusted your Workday deployment and, are just releasing with current BAU activity and patches. Regardless of which state of Workday implementation you are in, or you even haven't even started and just exploring it, I think this webinar will be a meaningful insight and will be a real eye-opener. So the other areas I like to talk about is the three main areas that Workday usually specializes in. Now, I'm not restricting that these are the only three areas, and you may argue with me, for those who have used Workday, there's many other modules out there, but I've just categorized it to these three. One is the human capital management, the second is the financial management, and third, personal favorite, I think, I haven't used this myself, but they've come up with a student academic management. I think that's great. Funny enough, and I just have to tell you the story. So a few years ago, I was in the academic side. I was brought in as a test manager, and they were moving from a legacy software to a more intuitive software, right? They had another software in the UK which they implemented, and the funny thing is, they were moving from a DOS, the black and green screen, to a more clickable and intuitive screen, and I had lots of resistance to move from that. And some of the feedback I got was like, "Oh my God, Priya, you expect us to do so many clicks? I rather prefer tabbing." And I was like, "Oh my goodness." So the reason I brought up that story is it's the human nature, right? We get so used and set in our ways that sometimes we fail to see something that can be much easier because we think it's just so much work. And it seems to go with testing Workday, right? If we are so set in testing it in one single way, sometimes we close out our mind to how we can test it more effectively. And this is what I want to start talking about and get your thinking process and the way you see testing in a different perspective. Cool. Moving on. So these are the unknowns now. The unknowns of Workday. Now, regardless of what business organization you are in, I mean, Workday is a great tool, don't get me wrong. The first question you need to ask is it the best fit for your organization? Although it's a great tool, it doesn't mean that it's the best fit for your organization. So do that homework. Look and see whether it actually adds value to your organization, it reduces your overcost, whatever it is, but do that homework first. The second thing that I need to talk about now, is the must-have and prerequisites. Now, there's many prerequisites. If you go to a Workday sales pitch, you'll see the list of things that they want you there. I'm sure a lot of you have been to that. What I would like to say is, and I'm going to emphasize on this, is your current data. Now, a tool is only as good as the data that goes into it, all right? There's no disputing that. So look at your current data. Is your data even sufficient? Is it in a good format to start off with? What is the format that Workday needs? And get your data sorted. There's no point in embarking testing Workday or even trying to deploy Workday if your data is not even in the format that it needs to be. And sometimes this data management is the one that takes up a lot of time. You don't want to be, in your design, well, probably in your build phase and finding out that you have a lot of design work to do on your data side, and that can take a lot of time. So get your data right. Third one, which is also my personal favorite, is the integration with existing platforms. Now, this cost me lots of grief, okay? I feel for this because I spent a lot of man hours and sweat trying to test this bloody thing. Look at your legacy systems. Make sure what state are your legacy systems. Are they end of life? Is their licenses about to be expired? What is the data state? Is there any limitation on those platforms? And how is it working? And can it in its current state integrate with Workday? These are the questions you should ask first. Last but not least is business processes. Now, for those who have used Workday, you will know Workday has a business process and workflow that you can customize, configure, whatever you call it, to work according to your organization. Now, if you are in the midst of going to deploy to Workday, look at your existing business processes and make sure that you can accommodate all that. Do you need to redefine anything? And what processes cannot be solutionized? Now, not every solution not every solution to a problem is an IT solution. There's some stuff that, it's unique to your organization, unique to your business. You just can't do it in a solution. So identify those and see where it has to be outside of the solution. And if it's so, why, what, how, and you're going to integrate it back to Workday, right? So think about all those ones. So these are the unknowns that you need to think about. And there's many other unknowns, but these are the 4 main things that I've picked up. Now, why should we test effectively? I'm not going to spend so much time on this slide. You guys probably already know this. So we want to increase operational efficiency. We want to return on investment. The other thing is we want to identify what we can automate, right? We want that automation capability. And automating testing, if you test effectively, and I have to stress on this, you would know what tasks can be automated because you are going to go there and test. It's not about taking one business process, testing it. Oh yeah, it works. It's passed. Yes, sweet. Think about the task that the end user has to do every day. I'll give you an example, right? So if you're a HR personnel and you're onboarding someone, and there are some fields that you have to fill, as boring as it may seem, the username or whatever. But it's something that you spend a lot of time. It's not difficult to do. Don't get me wrong. It's quite simple, but it takes a lot of time. And depending how big your organization is, you'll be finding that, those stuff is better handled, if it was automated. Now, some businesses and organizations have done that. They've put in their data, loaded it into Workday so that it gets pre-populated. And that's great. And some businesses and organizations have, got, graduate interns that come in and, oh yeah, let's give them all the not so great task to do to get them to fill in the data. So, try this will, if you test effectively, you will know where you can have your automation capability. And that's where we should all be moving towards to, right? The last one is it increases your confidence in the solution. Now, yeah, there's nothing greater than having a end user's confidence increase in the solution, right? So that's why we should test effectively. Moving on. And what does it reduces? So it reduces stress on resources and system. It reduces stress spent on firefighting issues. It reduces stress on your manual processing and your human error handling. So I'm not going to go so much into this slide. This is just something. If you have any questions later regarding this, you can, get back to me. But I'll go to the gist and the content of the slide that we want to talk about. What are the Workday testing challenges? And I may not have listed everything here. Don't worry, it's just not one slide. I have a few slides. But these are the main challenges that I see. One is the many customization customizable features, right? So Workday is so good where you can configure everything, and as much as it's great, it can be a testing challenge because people can change things on when they want. They can config, they can turn on and off the config that they want. They can suit or tweak their business processes, and yay, it works for this scenario, but who knows whether it works for the others. So that's one. The other thing is, as I talked about in the previous slide, is your different integration points. So that's a real big key, and you should actually look at your legacy systems and try and resolve that. So do your homework, and don't just think that, I know some of you who are in the testing industry might be thinking that, oh, okay, as a tester, my job is just to create test scenarios and test scripts and that. And this falls under the solution architect or the design team or the dev team. Yes and no. So they will do the work. You ask the questions. There's no harm in knowing more than what you should do. Look at that, ask the right questions, and see how you're going to test it. Okay? They will do the unit testing. That's correct. But you should do your testing as well. So get that. And the third one I have over here is the device computability and compatibility. So often this is left at the back end, right? So when you're doing financial management, you're basically calculating, bonuses or your sales revenue, whatever. Um, Make sure your current hardware in your organization, your infrastructure is able to support that. Make sure your speed is good. People get tripped up over the little things that when you deploy, then you find, oh no, our current system can't hold that. And if you have managers on the go, and they want to have handheld devices and mobile, Workday, of course, can integrate with all that. But don't leave that testing of that to the end, because one of the main selling points of that when you go into is you want people to be able to do stuff productively, right? Effectively. So they are usually on the go, and you wouldn't want something where you're so busy as a tester, oh yeah, it works on the laptop, it works on that, but who knows whether it works on my mobile. And sometimes people leave that to the very, very end of the testing spectrum, and that's where it trips us up. Cool. Moving on. The other testing challenges that we have is the type of organizational structures. So I've seen a lot of organizations. I've been in a lot of organizations, tier one organizations, MNCs, small businesses, you name it. I've been there. So it amazes me and how their org structure is, you know, actually defined. So there are a lot of organizational structures, and sometimes you need to tweak that to make Workday actually work the way you want to. So do a bit of homework on that as well. Understand the org structures. And I know some of you may be thinking again, oh gosh, this is just, that's not true. But it's actually, it holds a lot of weight, because you can change one person at the top of your organization, the HM, and your whole workflow down there, their approval and stuff gets all screwed up. So look at the type of the organizational structures, and you may have to change that if needed, to best suit, and see whether you can tackle all this upfront, not just further down your testing. And then look at your existing and non-existing business process workflow. Now, this is a challenge. So sometimes we have the design team going ahead, oh, this is how we designed our Workday to work. You have this business process and blah, blah, blah. But what about this business process? What about business process B? What about Sarah doing this? How is she going to do this? Sarah usually does this, going this way, and then she goes to C to get it approved, and then she goes to D. So there may be some that exist, and there may be some not that doesn't exist. And all this prep work usually is done up front. But if you're testing it, don't just test what you know. Go ahead there, find out your current landscape, and find out what you don't know. Sometimes the business will come back to you and say, oh, go to a day in a life. And it may seem like a BA one-on-one class now, but in the current landscape, testers are not only testers, they are more than that. So go ahead and try and get that sorted. The other thing that is quite a challenge is your user roles and security. This has tripped a lot of organizations up, right? So look at your user roles, look at your security matrix, have that predefined, have that tested up quite upfront, make sure the right super users are in. And the best way, to actually do that, which I'll talk later on, is actually get all your super users in and redefine their roles. So have that security matrix and user roles clearly defined. Cool. The next thing that we have that is a testing challenge for Workday is all your reporting functions. Now, I know in some testing cases, reporting is always requirement for reporting is always pushed at the very last. But sometimes those reporting are the very core of the business itself. So they can't do their sales if they don't know how much money is in here. They can't make a decision if they don't know how many people are in there. So this Workday has a cool reporting function. And some of it is not as straightforward as many of you will know. I've gone for a few Workday classes, Workday training myself for reporting on calculated fields, and it's not really straightforward. Well, I didn't find it straightforward, and it takes some time to do it. So that's one of the challenges. Actually, configuring it, that's cool, but testing it in a meaningful way is another thing altogether. And then you have your frequent updates and required patches. So Workday does their releases, and then it's a challenge for you who are in the BAU mode, have done your Workday, and then you're like, oh, Workday is releasing another new release. Oh gosh, what's in this? Oh, Workday's come up with a patch that needs to. So what kind of testing do I need to do for that? How will it affect my regression suite? And last but not least is keeping up with change. Now, in today's age and era, right, change happens all the time. And your organization might change. You might have a merger, you might have an acquisition, you might have, head of, people moving from one department to one org to a different region or whatsoever. So it's keeping up with that change on your daily BAU activity. That is also one. And how do you test that, right? So that's another challenge. Cool. So we've covered why we should test effectively. We've covered the challenges. Now let's try and tackle how we're going to go about it, right? I think that's what most of you would like to hear. So I've come up with this Workday test mantra, as I would call it. And this is the plan. So Workday, right? So I'll start with the W. Before you embark on your testing, you need to know your what and why. And then you go on to your objectives, you go on to your risks, you go to your key results, you go to your defect trend, you go to your avoidable issues, and you go to your yo-yo effect. I like that one because, it brings back childhood memories. But anyway, and I'll go into each. So I've made it this way so that it's quite simple and you can take it all in. So you can always remember Workday and then remember where each and everything acronym and what it's associated to. So the W in Workday, what and why. Know what you're meant to test and why you're testing it. Find out the scope. Is it an enhancement of feature? Is it an update to an application? Is it a security patch? Is it a fix to an existing defect? Find out your what and why. A lot of people also, I think, maybe think, oh, these are all things that we already know, but nobody really does it. Knowing and doing it is two different things. So as a tester, don't just know that that's what you are meant to test. Find out, ask the question, ask the why. Always ask the why. Why you're testing it, why you need to test it, and how you're going to test it, right? Now we go to the W. So what's the objective and outcome of that? So be clear on that, right? So if you already know what you're testing and why you're testing, be clear on the objective of that testing. Is it to ensure existing functionality remains as it is? Is it to ensure that it's working as per the business requirement? Is it something that we've been promised and it's been delivered? So look for that, find out your objective, and know why you're testing it. As crude as it may seem, a lot of testers do not do that. A lot of test practices do not do that because they're like, oh, yeah, this is what we need to test. We just test it, we'll pass it. If something breaks, oh, no, we tested it. So that's it. So find out what you're testing. What do you want to get out of the testing? And again, I would like to say that this can be simple as writing it on a paper, jotting it down somewhere, but go through this exercise. Now, what are the risks involved? Now, you need the R in Workday is for risk. Look at your associated risks, right? So if it's a new feature, if it's your a new module coming, how does it integrate with your existing stuff, and what risk or impact does it have to the business? Always think of your unhappy part, a worst case scenario. If that breaks, can business function as how it does today? What is our strategy? I mean, how can we do that? How much regression testing will be required? And what's the impact? Always look at your impact. If this breaks, would X not be able to run her financials for the day, month end, for example? And if she can't, does she have a workaround? So do your due diligence, find out the R for risk is in Workday. So remember that. And then we go to the K. Find out your key deliverables, right? Aim on what should be delivered at the end of each test phase. If you have one test phase over here, you've gone to your unit, your system, and you have a couple maybe of UAT testing. Some organizations do more than one user acceptance testing, some not, depending on the nature. So what do you want to be delivered at each test phase, right? Your standard and quality of your test execution. I always strive for the requirement not only meeting the business needs, but it exceeds the business expectation. So if there's a functionality that can improve further what they like, bring it up to the design team, bring it up to the user group and tell them, oh, look, you can also do this. Do you want to do this? So find out what's your key deliverables. Is it a fix to an existing defect? Yay. Can that defect be tested? So that's the K for Workday. Now D, I have to talk a bit more on defect trends, right? So when you start, get really, really, really chummy with your defects. So when I was doing my Workday, when I had the experience to test Workday and go through, we had a huge amount of defects, right? Of a defect, it was just there all over the place. So we need to understand the defects. So really get chummy with your defects, analyze your defects, really spend some time. Prepare a matrix to identify which area or modules of this defect exists. And it doesn't take time. If you're using an automation tool or not any tool, even if you're doing Excel, just categorize it on which area or module it does exist and prepare a matrix and look at it and see if there's a pattern that you can work on. If the defect is high in one particular area, is it because of the people, or is it because, is it a user error, for example? Is it a business process error? Or is it a system error where, your platforms are not integrating? So why? Get to that root cause of that defect. Because if you don't do this right now, it's going to come back and hit you in the bum later on. So do that and get really chummy with your defects. Really, really, really drive for root cause analysis. Oftentimes we create a defect, it gets fixed, and then somebody else goes and say, and when you go back and say, oh, I didn't do anything, but it's working right now. And you're like, oh, what did you do? No, I didn't do anything. And then they're like, okay, it's working, so I'm going to pass it. Don't do that. Okay. Yes, it's good to pass it, of course, but try and find why the defect occurred in the first place, right? There must be a reason. There's always a reason. Did something change somewhere that caused it to pass now? Or did something change it somewhere that caused it to break? Is there a pattern? Do that. And, as testers or even as business users that are using Workday, try and do this. And this exercise is not difficult, actually. You can actually just, probably just half an hour of your time. But get really chummy with your defects. The A in Workday. Now, what are the avoidable issues, right? So if you've done your defect trend and if you analyze it, you'll see a picture on what issues could have been avoided, right? For example, this defect actually happened in Workday because we did not turn this config on. So why didn't you turn that config on? Was it a human error? Was it because we thought that config wasn't required? So try and pinpoint if it could have been avoided, and if it can be avoided, then go back, retrofit it back to your regression suite, retrofit it back to your requirements, change, create an addendum to requirements. I know all of this may sound, that's a lot of work for us, but trust me, it will pay off in the end, and you need to do this. Could there have been more coverage in that area? Maybe we need more business expertise or users or testers to actually test that area in a different perspective. So look for those avoidable issues. Some of the issues and defects like could have been avoided completely, right? And what we don't want is going into production and then, oh no, we have this defect. And then it's like, oh, I could have avoided that if I just did that. I could have avoided this if we had more time. We could have, I know time is always a constraint when we are testing, but try, if you do your defect trend, try and associate your high risk areas, which I talked about the R in Workday earlier, and test those first. And, as you move on, evolve, don't get so hooked up and, caught out thinking that your test or regression suite, that's it and I can't change it. So try and change it. You have to change it at some cases. Go back in there, change it, do it to it. And what was the drive? If you were concentrated on testing of the area, what was the drive of that? Why did you do that? Is it because the business said that or you thought it was? And maybe you need to shift your focus to a different side of the area. So if look at all those avoidable issues after you do your defect trend analysis, and the picture will seem a bit more clearer. Now we go to the yo-yo effect. Now, this refers to issues or problems that reoccur, bounce back into play. Now, you remember when I talked about, oh, I don't know why this defect happened and I was fixed, I didn't do anything. If you don't get back to the root cause analysis, most likely, 90% of the cases, it's going to happen in production again. Okay? It usually does. To me, it has. Not one time. And it's funny because we don't get to the root cause of it. And finally, we go into production. There's so many other variables in play, and it all comes back into us, right? And you don't know why. And it may be just a different system out there has changed, a different process out there. So it might be a small change that has a huge ripple effect at the downstream. So the why in Workday for me usually stands for the yo-yo effect. So if you've done all the stuff up front, then you can minimize this yo-yo effect. And then people won't go like, oh, I don't know, who was the tester? Who tested this? Or who's the test manager? Why didn't the testing cover this? Wasn't this part of our requirements? Requirements are such, but it can't possibly cover every single scenario, right? So that's why having best practices in testing, in getting automation out there will help the user or even the testers actually, or your team actually focus on all these unusual scenarios that may occur, the nitty-gritty ones that cause problems, right? Because if you're so hooked up on all trying to get all the known stuff tested, a lot of people don't pay attention to the unknowns, right? Which, sometimes only happen in a particular fashion when a particular sequence of events are triggered. So yeah, that's the why in yo-yo. So that's my Workday test mantra. I haven't finished yet, although I've got to the why. So we know to test effectively. I've gone through what I think is my best practice of testing effectively. Now, in order to test effectively, yes, you need to have a plan, you need to have best practice, but you need to have enablers. And these are some of which I brought up. Now, tools aiding Workday, right? And I call these enablers because, there's not just one tool out there that can test Workday. There's quite a few. Worksoft, Genie, Kainos WorkSmart, and WorkTest all specialize, especially in testing Workday. But that doesn't mean that's the best tool that you should use. There's a lot of tools out there. Again, you must understand Workday is the solution. Okay. Any tool is, again, as good as the hand that builds it. So if you know how to follow best practices and get all your ducks lined in a row, you can use any of these tools. And I assure you, it could give you, most likely it will give you a positive result. It's not going to give you a negative result, right? It's just that people tend to put a heavy reliance on the tool and just take a backseat and, oh, the tool should do this, the tool. How would the tool know, right? Although we are going into AI, artificial, and I'll be really happy if the tool really knows how to read my mind and, oh, yes, go ahead and test that. But, the tool is, again, only as good as the hand that builds it. So these are some of the tools that you can use, and they're great tools. So we have Worksoft, we have What If, we have Tricentis Tosca, which has also been identified in the Gartner Magic Quadrant as one of the leading technologies. So look that up. We have Test Complete, we have IBM Rational, we have Genie. I personally like that icon, quite cool. We have Kano's WorkSmart. I've worked with Kano's WorkSmart before. I'm it's not bad. It's not good. I think there's just some work to be done there. And I think they have evolved from the first time I've used it to now. But you know, and then there's Selenium, and then there's WorkTest, and there's Catalan Studio. So whatever your expertise may be out there, you maybe have automation knowledge, you have API testing, you're open to a lot of open source tools. All these tools are enablers for Workday. It is how you make it work for you, right? It's how you make it work in helping you test Workday that matters. They're not bad. In fact, they're good. And each tool, I'm sure each tool in the industry is evolving as we go. So have a look at all these tools. Don't get so worried and daunted by it, but they're all great tools in helping you to test Workday. And if you follow my mantra, I'm sure you'll get there. You'll find that these are actually quite great enablers that will help you test Workday effectively. Now that we've gone through the tools, again, I will say the tool is only good as the hand that wields it. So the ultimate key actually lies with the tester. I personally like the show, this Guardians of Galaxy, because it has so many interesting characters, and it's so prevalent to what happens in our current state, right? We go into an organization and, we are dealing with so many interesting characters out there, and each one is unique. But again, we are the guardians of quality. So what you want actually is an individual that has the ability. Now, although I say it lies with the tester, some of you have already done your Workday implementation, and our system analysts and BAs who are supporting the current business process. So although the key lies with the tester, as I say, it actually lies with the individual that's using it, right? Your ability to venture into the known and unknowns, your ability to analyze the impact and risk, and your ability to be bold to react to those challenges, right? Don't just say, oh no, I don't know about this, and walk away. So it does lie with you. If you follow the Workday test mantra, and if you actually take a time to think about what I just said, you will come back to me, I'm sure, and say, yeah, it does work. So, like every challenge and every problem that we've faced, right, there's always a silver lining. I've made a silver lining over Workday. So when you're, daunted by it, you're unsure by it, if you just take the W in Workday and flip it, you can make it work for your organization. You'll see that, the W actually has a smile over there. So everything can be changed. It's not set in its way. And if at all, some of you may be thinking that you are unsure on how to go about testing Workday, unsure on how to, even ask those questions. Feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help, and that's what TCC stands for, right? We specialize in this, and we are here to actually get your testing regime and best practices in where it should be and not where you want to be. So, reach out to us. We are there to help, and we're quite likable people. So please do that. And yeah, I think we've come to the end of the webinar. So
Yes.
do we have any questions?
Yes, thank you, Priya. Really wonderful information. So we've received many questions, so we'll start to cover what we can, being mindful of everyone's time. So the first one that came in is, our audience is wondering about your opinion about best practices related to integrations versus new Workday releases.
Yeah, so kudos on that person who got that question a bit ahead of the agenda. I think it was Elena. So, Elena, and anyone else who may have had that. So, know your integration points, right? Do your research. So now, if you have a couple of integration points, and they may be your, financial suite or whatever, your payroll system or your learning management system, whatever it may be, know your integration points. Find out as much information as you can on that Workday release. Now, Workday has, they've been very good, right? So they usually have their releases put into the Workday tenant beforehand. So try and play around it as much as possible. If these are high risk areas, make sure that you address them, right? So if you know this integration point, for example, let's just take a payroll system, right? I mean, obviously the impact is good if some, it's great, right? If someone doesn't get paid in time. So what my personal experience was, we actually had a payroll system, you know, environment to play around. Believe it or not, we actually got trained in the payroll system as well, and we actually went into that and started putting data into payroll system and make sure it gets integrated and see how it gets spit out into Workday, and it shows the right data into Workday. So if you know these are high risk areas, then test those first. What you want to do in your best practices, you want to fail fast, and that's what we are aiming for. Test that one first, right? And play around as much as you need. See if your regression pack, and I would suggest this, categorize your regression pack into chunks, as in high impact areas, what that you really need to testing. And I must say that integration has to be way up there. I hope I answered that question. Any other questions? Hello?
Yes, we have a couple more. So I think we have time probably for two more. How do you prepare yourself for Workday changes and manage the updates to the integration systems?
Yeah, so it's something, so this question is similar to the one about your best practices, right? So follow my Workday mantra, get to your what, why objective all figured out, do a simple exercise, document it, a one pager with all those questions answered. Is there any customization required before the integrate to make the integration work? Ensure those changes don't get broken. What are the dependencies on that? Just do that a little bit of homework and make sure. And you may have to reach out to several teams or individuals to get that, but do that and then reach out to your Workday community. I mean, as simple as it may be, ask the question and share the experience. We all learn from each other every day, like how I'm here today from TUC telling you about my experiences and how to tackle Workday. So share that experiences and ask that question in the Workday community. Workday has quite a huge community, and sometimes some of the answers and solutions may actually amaze you, right? You may have not even talked about that. So talk to the community and find out, how they best prepared for those. Because I don't really know the context of the integration points and what you're specifically meaning, I could, this is my general best practice and how I go, but probably I could understand a bit more, then I could give you really specific answers on how to tackle that.
Okay, and how do you undo an integration if you need to integrate something based on a new release?
Cool. So I would suggest, basically, before going into your integration, right, and you've already got an integration A deployed and it's working fine, always have a restore point built in to go back in a point of time and test that before you actually go live, so that you can always know what's your rollback strategy and how to back out of a change if required. A lot of people don't put a lot of thought in that because, everyone hopes for the happy path, but try and roll back your strategy and try and back out that change and see what happens when you back out the change. Can you go back to your previous state? And always be preventive, right, as opposed to reactive. Most of the things that trip us up is, because we have to have the ability to look out before it occurs. So think about stuff that, if it's a new release and it was working previously, what has changed? There's clearly something that has changed for it to break. There's no way that it could have been working then and it broke now, unless, of course, and again, I would say that's also not, something in your landscape has changed, something in your environment has changed. Sometimes the production system cannot mirror exactly as per the test system. But Workday is quite good because they have the sandbox environment, they have your tenants. So in that way, you are a bit more better prepared. But just go back to that point in time and look out for your rollback strategy and restore it to that point of time that you knew it was working.
Okay. And lastly, this might be a more Workday account manager question, but can you create a learning account for a non-employee?
When they, I need to understand a bit more context of what they mean by learning account for a non-employee. So again, I would say that Workday heavily relies on data, right? So I need to know what data you're talking about and where that information lies in there to be able to answer that question. But if the person who asked that question, if you can provide me a bit more context post this call, then I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. Once again, thank you, Priya. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Please follow TTC on LinkedIn and Twitter to keep up with our upcoming webinars. And be sure to provide feedback on that email survey. We plan to continue giving the testing marketplace quality information to revolutionize the digital transformation journey. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our webinar.
Thank you.